I would say it's great being up this morning, this early this morning. Thank you, Penguin.
Okay, folks. So now we are online. First of all, I'd like to thank everyone, every one of you for being here at this time. So in the morning, in the night, in the afternoon, and for you
Yes.
people that are going to watch our video. Okay. Today we are going to talk a little bit about the ocean defense, the ocean preservation, and the problems we got. Okay. So for this opening, my name is Paulo Penguin. I am a co-founder of Divers for Sharks. You can see our medias at diversforsharks.com, at Facebook, at YouTube, at Instagram, and you just check there. And please follow us, support us, and give us a like under this video. To begin this live, I'm going to pass to the other co-founder of Divers for Sharks, José Truda Palazzo, that has been just the whole day watching whales, and now he's going to talk about sharks and oceans. Okay, so that's Truda, that's the co-founder of Divers for Sharks. Truda, you're
Hi
on.
guys, it's great to be here, and sorry if I'm looking a little bit
Tired.
tired. We've been on the water for the last well, I don't know, 12 hours, and we're doing humpback whale surveys here in northeastern Brazil, and fortunately there's plenty of them. We saw a lot of cows, and this is one of my half torches for the Brazilian humpback whale project. The other one, of course, is being the co-founder of Divers for Sharks with Paulo Penguin. And I'm really very pleased to see Gary Stokes here in this conversation. Gary has been a real icon of shark conservation and marine conservation in Asia from his working base in Hong Kong. We had the pleasure of meeting him a few years ago at a CITES meeting. He's probably going to talk about that. But there's a few people that really deserve our respect and our admiration and our support and gratitude for the stuff that they do in practice for marine conservation and for sharks. And Gary is one of those persons that I'm really privileged to call a friend. So I, just like Penguin, I'd like to welcome him, and I hope we'll give him a lot of time during this talk so he can talk about not only the past where he has built his career as a stellar marine conservation activist, but also the work that he has started with Oceans Asia, which already has achieved a lot.
Wow. Well, thank you. I mean, how do I follow that? So, good morning from Hong Kong. You're going to have the sunrise behind me. But yeah, as you both said, you know, we had the pleasure of meeting at CITES in 2013 in Thailand, when I was the lone sea shepherd in a hall of sharks, basically. And I had the pleasure of meeting you two guys, and even more so, one of the funniest stories I think would be on the last day when you guys all donned a sea shepherd shirt and we sat in front of the cameras in the middle of the CITES hall. So yeah,
That's right.
thanks for your support's been amazing. So
That's
so
great.
yeah,
And
where do we want to go? And
yeah, and now we have our model, Sandrinha, who is in
Hello.
American. She is a
Nice to
model.
meet
She's
you.
a shark
Yeah.
lover, a diver, and she's going to talk a little bit about her passion for the ocean. And
And
folks,
she's
if
our ambassador in India and elsewhere.
yeah, and her
Yes.
connection is not exactly good. So if the connection fell out, please excuse us. Sandrinha, you're up.
Yes. Yes, guys. First of all, I'm so sorry because I'm still like in the street. I just stopped it to be online here on live because I was planning something, but whatever. So yeah, I love sharks. This is like great. It's my work right now. I'm a model, but also I like to work for representing the sharks. Um, I'm with Truda and Penguin doing the shooting all the time. We are talking about the sharks. So I'm just someone who loves and really care about. And I'm really glad to be here with you to talking and listening a lot about sharks and about the nature and the world, in the sea world, right? I'm so sorry. I don't know if the connection is good because for me it's a little bit slowy. So I don't know if you guys can hear me.
Yep, we do. We sure do.
Okay.
I can hear you loud and clear all the way around the other side of the world.
Oh yeah, we are like we have Brazil here, Hong Kong, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm in California, so we are good.
Okay, so the basically we are going to talk about the problems we have on the oceans and the physical problems. Let's see like this. For example, the boats, the oil engines that goes to the water, the ghost nets, and also the non-physical problems, the philosophical problems. Let's say, let's talk like that. That's what's happened on the meetings, the conference internationally. So I'll ask Trude again to talk a little bit what he thinks the difference between what happens in the water and what happens in the rooms.
Jesus, yeah. Well, I have the very doubtful distinction of being one of the Brazilian activists who spent most time in international treaty meetings like CITES, which Gary was mentioning. CITES is the Convention on International Trade of Endangered Species of Fauna and Flora. It is one of the good guys conventions, which was established in the 70s with the clear aim of restricting international trade in species which were endangered by trade or endangered by other issues and which would be even further damaged by trade, or also to protect species which could become endangered by excessive international trade. For a while, this convention had a very specific threat of being hijacked by the wildlife contraband mafias. And that was back in the 90s, especially when we had the ivory smugglers and the sea turtle traders. And in particular, when CITES started to deal with marine species, there was this real buzz about it. And all these mafias that profit from overfishing and destruction of marine biodiversity got all hyped up because a conservation treaty would start dealing with marine species. And for a while, it almost wrecked CITES because these guys had an upper hand. Japan, of course, brought its puppet countries to vote against any protection for marine species. We had China pressuring different countries, particularly in Africa and some of the Latin Americans too. But I would say that in recent years, the pro conservation side has been able to bring CITES back on track to helping protect marine species by either restricting trade in certain animals, in marine animals, or forbidding trade in those most endangered species. We haven't been able to do that for some really, really endangered species with high commercial value, such as bluefin tuna, but we have been able to advance protection for sharks, both at CITES and at other conventions like the Convention of Migratory Species. Of course, the problem that happens is that countries like our native Brazil are usually very good in agreeing to international levels of protection for these species. But then when it comes to domestic laws or domestic practice, or even controlling our borders to prevent the trade in endangered species, that simply doesn't happen on the ground. So I guess that one of the big challenges we have, especially in developing countries, is to make sure that their governments live up to the promises they make in international fora, like CITES, like other conventions. We're approaching the final discussions at the United Nations of a new treaty to protect biodiversity beyond national jurisdiction, which basically means beyond the 200 mile zone limit from coastlines of coastal countries. Uh, the high seas are basically a lawless expense where marine biodiversity can be appropriated uh, in the most unsustainable way by whichever country wants to do it. There are, of course, the so-called regional marine fisheries agreements, like the tuna conventions, but they simply do not work for conservation. They work for the overfishing mafias, and they take too long to make conservation decisions. They don't care at all about bycatch, so-called incidental catches of endangered or threatened vulnerable species that get killed by the millions by the overfishing fleets operating in the high seas. So now there is a chance that the United Nations will finalize a treaty to implement biodiversity conservation measures in the high seas. We're not sure where that's going to lead. We hope that it's going to lead to some sort of protection for specific areas, for a time-limited closures in more sensitive areas, and of course, more protection for endangered species. But again, that depends on the political will of national governments. And if we, as divers, conservationists, voting citizens, do not push for our governments to do better, nothing's going to happen, despite the international commitments that our countries are making. I guess that's a good introduction, Fred.
Yeah, that's true. Gary, my friend, I would like to know your opinion about it. And then after you tell us your opinion, talk a little bit about your job, your work, what you have done back there in Hong Kong. That's a place for here. We in Brazil, we think it's a dangerous place due to the Chinese mining boats, fishing boats. And
Even for
I know that you
Brazilians, it
go
looks scary.
I know that you
No,
go
yeah.
to the meeting rooms, but you also pilot a rubber boat, right? So talk a little bit about your work, please.
Yeah, well, I mean, exactly where Trudeau was just saying, we have the laws in place, but obviously the proof, as we say in England, is in the pudding, and that is the enforcement. It's all very well having these things agreed to in these big halls. I think one of the things that was the biggest wake-up call for me when I went along to CITES, I would always imagine CITES was a place of conservation. And when I first stepped foot in that hall, I realized I was surrounded by everybody who actually wanted to profit from the death of animals.
Yep.
When we went in 2013, it was very, very one-sided. It was very much the wildlife mafia, as we want to call them, the shark fin traders, the tuna traders, everybody was there. All the big game hunters were there. And all they were doing were lobbying to protect their livelihoods, to carry on their sort of desecration of the planet, wiping out species after species. So we do need to have these laws in place, but we also have to follow them up. And that's where, you know, I've taken my activism has been along the sort of law enforcement, you know, backing up every action we do with legal facts. One of the things I do find a lot in conservation is empathy. So a lot of the things are like, please don't kill the sharks. Please don't do this. They're lovely. They're, you know, we love them. They're, you know, that doesn't count when it comes to governments. All they're looking at is numbers and, you know, livelihoods and production and GDP and things like that, and trade deals. And that's the problem. So where we need to be looking at is what laws are in place, what laws are being broken, and how can we nail these guys? And that's pretty much what I try to do here in Hong Kong, where, you know, we have more than 50% of the world's shark fin coming through Hong Kong. A lot of it goes on into China. Many people that I speak to online, you know, they're popping up and going, oh my God, that's evil, that's illegal. It's not illegal. And that's the biggest wake-up call for most people, is they think that shark fin is illegal. It's not illegal. It's illegal if you kill one of the endangered species and ship it internationally without a CITES permit, which is where the whole CITES comes into play. But then again, we need governments that are actually going to enforce that. I've had shipments here where they've arrived in Hong Kong. I've seen they've got oceanic white tip fins, which are CITES protected. And I've notified the authorities, and they've just said, well, it's already in the country. There's nothing we can do about it. I was like, well, it just arrived in the country literally an hour or a day before, but there's nothing they can do. I found whale shark fins in the street shops in Shungwan, and nothing they can do because they're already in the country. And the way that CITES is sort of set up, it's the onus is put on the exporting country. So you're getting these poor developing countries where most of the sharks and shark fin are actually coming from. They're issuing dodgy papers if they're issuing anything at all. And then they arrive in somewhere like Hong Kong, where we have the infrastructure in place. The customs here are very good, but it's not our problem. It's the problem of the exporting country. And that's where we're seeing things like, I get quite disheartened with, going to these events, these flying around the world. We all fly to these different places and sit in these halls and make these big decisions. But at the end of the day, if the governments don't have the will to actually fight for these things and hold them up, then, really, what is the point? But they do have their position to play. So, as you guys said, so I used to be the Asia director for Sea Shepherd. For 10 years, I was working with, Sea Shepherd, and especially with Paul Watson, good friend of mine. Learned a lot from Paul, have the utmost respect for him. And we got some amazing stuff done. Where was I getting to? So with Sea Shepherd, I went to Antarctica. I went on Operation No Compromise in 2010, 2011, where we chased the whalers. And then came back and then took over as the director for Asia, really, specifying mainly on sharks and shark fin. One of the biggest things that we ended up doing was actually at CITES, as we were just saying about the people trying to take over CITES. We did an investigation here, and we uncovered a Singaporean guy, Dr. Giam Chu Hu. And he's basically been within CITES at that time. He had been in there 17, 18 years. He was lobbying from the inside, using his position to block any protection for sharks. He also worked for the Singapore and the Hong Kong shark fin traders. So what we did was we actually outed him. We made that very public. We were also watching the Secretary General at the time, who was a new guy, John Scanlon, young blood in a sea of sort of old dinosaurs, who were all protecting their own personal interests. They've had ivory traders actually working within CITES. I mean, that sort of spells up where it was. And the thing was, they didn't have a conflict of interest clause. Unlike all the other UN bodies, they didn't actually have conflict of interest. So here was this guy. He worked for the Singapore and Hong Kong shark fin traders, and he was on the inside blocking every single scientific proposal that was coming through to try and get protection for sharks. And everybody was shaking their heads and thinking, how come? Well, we've done all the groundwork, all the scientists have done the work, put in the recommendation, and it got rejected. And by highlighting that, and we had a a bit of fun one morning, because we had written a 65-page document. Most people don't actually know this story. I got Paul, I wrote a cover letter, got Paul to sign it. And then we actually had that delivered to every single person at the Animals Committee meeting in Geneva. This is the CITES Animals Committee meeting. They were having a meeting in Geneva. And on Monday morning at 9:30, when they had their first coffee break, everybody's BlackBerry and device went beep, 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 beep. And this report came in with Dr. Guillem's thing. And we had people actually at the convention, and they said, what the hell have you done? We said, why? What's up? And they said, well, they've actually shut down the meeting for the afternoon, kicked out the observers, kicked out the press, and they're having a sit down to try and work out what's going on here. At the same time, we had also emailed Singapore and got all the Singapore government and warned them about this guy. So when he called and said, look, it's the setup, I've been framed here and they're all ganging up against me, they already were already on the defensive. And without sounding too crude, as my police friend who helped me with the report said, we will make him as popular as a turd in a swimming pool. Nobody wanted to touch him. Nobody wanted to go near him. And the thing was, within CITES, they couldn't get rid of him because he was put there in place by the country. So he actually still remained. He's probably still there, I think, Trudeau, right? He's still in place. I mean, he's probably in his 80s now, but he's absolutely impotent. Whenever he gets up to stand up to say anything about anything, he just gets laughed at because of this report that showed very clearly his intentions and what he was up to. So, yeah, I mean, these laws have their place, but obviously there's limitations. What else would you like, Penguin?
Absolutely. Can you talk to us a little bit, Gary, about Oceans Asia and
sure.
its inception and what you guys been doing? I've been following it through your Instagram account, and I find it just absolutely amazing.
Yeah, so basically, about 2 years ago, for whatever reason, Sea Shepherd decided they would pull out of Asia, which I still, to this day, can't fathom why. But I understand we need to, funds are very stretched, and we had a big fleet. We had 10 ships when I left Sea Shepherd, and we need to send all the funds to the ships. So I was left in Asia with all the work that I'm doing here, and decided I wanted to obviously continue. I think it's important. So I set up Oceans Asia with my shipmate from when I went to Antarctica, Dr. Till Phelps Bondaroff, who's my partner in crime. He's the brains of the bunch. Very academic. He writes all of our reports, does all of our investigations sort of academically, writes some great reports into species that sometimes are getting overlooked. He's been working on almost for a year now, on a report about the sea cucumber industry and all the criminology behind it. It's massive. One of the things that we do see, Till came over here, and I took him around the wet markets and dry markets here. And everybody looks at the shark fin, but nobody looks at the sea cucumber or the fish maw or the abalone that's, coming in by the ton daily. So they're as equally important as the sharks to the ecosystems.
There's been all that hype about the Galapagos Chinese fishing fleets going around that, but there's also a huge contraband of sea cucumbers from that part of the planet too.
Yeah, so I mean, we need to be looking at not just these iconic species like whales, dolphins, turtles, and sharks. We realize we do need to be looking at, abalone and sea cucumbers and seahorses and things like that. So we will focus on some of the lesser iconic species and try to put the spotlight on them. As for me, I take care of all of our investigations and operations, largely on the ground in Hong Kong at the moment. Obviously with COVID, I can't travel around the region, but it's covering the Southeast Asian region. So exactly the same as I was doing with Sea Shepherd, I'm now doing under our banner of Oceans Asia. I do have a small boat here. Actually, it's probably just behind me. There we go.
All right.
So there is Seawolf at anchor just behind me. And what we do with that boat, I mean, that boat has got us into lots of interesting places. We had another one before called Amberjack, named after my two children. And we've retired that one at the moment. But we go out, what we have in Hong Kong is a trawler ban. So there is no trawling in Hong Kong at all. That was banned in 2012. And what we've seen with that is a bounce back of wildlife here. I mean, the fish life has really, really come back. And we're seeing you know, local boats here now going out, and before they were catching like tiny little, you know, fish, and they would just dry them and grind them up and put them on top of the noodles. Now they're getting fish sort of like this size that they can actually eat. So the artisanal fishermen are really happy. But because of that, we're getting mainland Chinese boats coming across our borders and then coming in and fishing illegally. So we go out there and tell them to leave. So yeah, I basically I go out there and I document these boats in action. I use the drone and I send the drone in before they even know we're there. We've got documented footage of their activities, and then we come alongside. Now we have worked with the Hong Kong police, the Marine police have been fantastic. When we call them, they come charging in, and as soon as these boats come, the trouble the police have is their boats are so loud you can hear them from 5 kilometers away. So these Chinese boats go straight back across the border. Whereas with us, obviously that doesn't happen. We get in there, we get the footage, we you know, highlight all that. So working in conjunction with them, we then decided that, you know, okay, we call the police and they end up chase them. So why waste their time? So I got a good friend of mine who's a model actress, Chinese. I asked her to record a message for us in Chinese. Stop! We are documenting your activity. You're fishing illegally. Please leave these waters. The footage will be passed to the authorities. And we have that in Chinese. And we come up alongside these boats and play that over a big megaphone, and you watch them run. It's quite funny. Especially when you come in at nighttime with all your lights out. And we've come up on these big trawlers at nighttime, and obviously the sea at night is tranquil and silent, and suddenly a big spotlight comes on and this message comes out. They had no idea who we are. They don't know what's behind the light because it's so bright. And normally you just see us scrambling on the back, and they pull in their nets and they turn and they run for the border, which is obviously quite satisfying. But more importantly, it's all being documented, and that's where, you know, my time with Sea Shepherd all came around. I'm a photographer, first and foremost. That's what I was doing, and as Paul Watson always says, the camera is the most powerful weapon in the world. And I was privileged that you know, Sea Shepherd entrusted me with that weapon when we went to Antarctica, and you know, a picture says 1,000 words, but it also puts people in jail if they're doing illegal activity. So, you know, and nowadays with everybody having mobile devices, you know, the camera is now becoming more and more prolific. People can snap things easier. I mean, I used to go down the markets with a big SLR camera, and of course everybody sees you coming. Now I walk around with a phone, nobody knows. So you can really get some good, you know, footage. So yeah, that's pretty much what we're doing here. We're also doing, as you saw, a lot of work on plastic pollution. You know, it's one thing trying to save all the animals in the ocean, but if it's clogged up with plastic, then obviously that comes into it. So our role that we're doing with Sea Shepherd, with Oceans Asia, is to literally span the whole ocean, all the issues. So whether it's plastic pollution, we're looking into the wildlife smuggling and the illegal wildlife trade. We're looking into shipping routes. We have an operation where we're monitoring a load of reefers, the big refrigerated cargo ships, and we watch who they go out with, who they're rendezvousing with, building a big database. So we actually have a network of, you know, either the Taiwanese fleet or the Chinese fleet, so we can actually see what's the activity on the high seas. And then of course there's the shark fin, which is you know, everything here. And we're working with, we have pink dolphins here. So I work very closely with Dr. Lindsay Porter, who you may have met, Truda. She's on the IWC for small cetaceans. Very good friend of mine. We go out and we do quite a bit of work with the acoustics for the Chinese white dolphin and also finless porpoises. 2 cetaceans we actually have locally here. So yeah, we're pretty much all round, and we keep very busy. We're very small, and we try to give as much bang for your buck as we can.
Fantastic. I don't know if you noticed, but your picture made headlines and went all over social media in Brazil. You with those that string
holding up the mast.
Yeah. And but when I first saw that, I said, "Hey, here's Gary being talked about in Portuguese. That's amazing."
Yeah, well, actually, I just had it came out on TV in Colombia as well last night. But yeah, that was an issue that, I mean, that just goes to show the power of the camera, because we were out on the Soko Islands, a small cluster of islands just to the southwest of Hong Kong at the entrance to the Pearl River Delta. And we were doing microplastic survey, me and a friend of mine, Naomi Brennan. And she's the scientist of the group. And we just started noticing in February these masks washing up on the beach. That was just 6 weeks after it all started, and we just collected them and started taking pictures of them. I put them all on a bit of rope and just held them up and said, "Quick, take a picture of this." I'll put a post out and tell people to be a bit more responsible. That was it. It was very innocent. Put the post out, woke up in the morning, we had over 500,000 views.
Yeah,
and then it just went ballistic from there. I mean, we've to date now, Until has been tracking all of our media, exposure. We've had over 1,800 articles written globally, worldwide. We've been on about 12 major news networks. It went on for 5 months, and it's still going on now. I mean, like I say, Colombia last night. But yeah, that picture's gone everywhere. Till just told me apparently one of the big science journals is actually going to be using it as its cover, which is kind of unique.
That's great.
Yeah, that's great. Folks, I would like to apologize for Sandrina. Her connection really is down. She tried to reconnect for a few times, but I guess she won't be able to take part on the rest of this live. So I'm sorry for that, but we'll have a chance to talk to her in another lives. Gary, as you were saying, one of the difficulties is the cost of things to do this, right? So that's why probably Sea Shepherd left the Asia branch, because it's really difficult to take care of the ocean without support, right? So I'm asking for everyone that would see this video to look for our page, Divers for Sharks. Now we put the page now also in English and in Spanish. It was first only in Portuguese, but now you can check the whole page in English. There you have a place where you can become a volunteer, where you can donate, make a donation to keep our work going on. Go to these meetings is really expensive. We know that. To keep a boat on the water running is really also expensive. And we need support from everyone. We need people to become volunteer. We need people to help paying our costs. In our page, diversforsharks.com, they can do it. And Gary, please let me know, how can people access the Ocean Asia? Is there a place where they can help you?
Yeah, so we obviously we have oceansasia.org as our web domain. At the moment, what we are doing with funds is basically through our Patreon. So there are links on that site to our Patreon so that people can sort of support where they can. Mm-hmm. I've always been the worst person when it comes to asking for money.
Same with me.
And that is our problem. That's why we are very limited, really, with what we can do. But I think what we are doing with the funds that we do have speaks for its words.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
I don't know how much time you've got. If you wanted to chat about Galapagos, because that's obviously a very hot topic at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
sure.
Actually, maybe I might swing around so you can actually get some sunlight. There we go. You might even be able to see me now. As the sun's coming up, it's getting
a little more detail. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, it's getting so backlit. There we go. Now you can actually see me.
Great. By the way, Gary, special thanks for you for being up so this early. People here in Brazil, we are 7 p.m., but Gary woke up at about 5 a.m.
5:30. Yeah. Well, why don't we tell everybody about that one, Penguin? So at 12:30 last night, I get Penguin saying, "So you on for later?" I'm like, "What?" So we ended up, going to bed very quickly, getting a few hours of shut eye and then getting up. So Galapagos. I mean, that's been another interesting case of the Chinese fleet en masse coming in and obviously taking a huge biomass of the ocean. But one of the things that I try to always look at, and I call it intelligence-based conservation, is actually just look at the facts. Let's, get rid of all the drama, get rid of all the geopolitics, which is what I've started to see a lot with the Galapagos issue. Especially when you start getting the US Secretary of State, Pompeo, coming in and using it as a geopolitical tool. He doesn't give a damn about sharks. He never has. Probably doesn't even know where the Galapagos is. But it's just geopolitics. It's like another way to get the world hating China. Now, I'm not an apologist for China, but I am a realist, and anybody doing anything harmful or illegal is obviously an issue. So that's why we started to investigate this fleet, because all the media was saying they were longliners, there's walls of hooks and everything, catching all the sharks that are swimming outside of the marine park. Every vessel we found was a squid boat. Mm-hmm. Now, squid boats can't really catch sharks, if you know how a squid boat works. So we did this report, and on there's even a video, so you can actually see these little lines go down with little barbs. The squid attack them, and they get pulled up, and then they fall off, and then they come back down again.
Light.
Yeah. So when we started looking, we found 213 boats that were all squid boats. They were all in international waters. And they were listed with the South Pacific RFMO. So on the surface, they're legal as far as we can see. Now that's, of course, assuming that everybody is having their AIS on. So what we're trying to do is put a bit of balance to everything and look at things, because yes, there's over 200, 300 boats there. They are fishing all the squid, and they are taking a load of squid. In fact, China takes 70% of the world's, squid. I keep saying shrimp. It's early. China catches up to 70% of the world's squid. It exports a lot of that to all the nations around the world. So if you're sat in America and you're having calamari, 60% of the US's import of squid comes from China. So, you see all these people online, and it's always the keyboard warriors. You should sink all the ships, ban China, boycott this. And they're probably sat in a sports bar eating calamari and having a bud. And that's the reality of things. It's very easy to hate people on the other side of the world doing something that maybe like for shark fin. It's very easy to tell people, don't eat shark fin soup. Well, if you tell Americans don't eat turkey at Thanksgiving, it's a similar sort of, argument. They'll just go, no, it's our tradition. And that's what we have over here. And that's what we've got to break, is that cultural barrier. Obviously, impacts to ecosystems are the most important, and that's where the sharks come. But going back to Galapagos.
That's just like the coal meat here in Brazil and the Amazonia. It's also a problem. Everybody knows. Going back to Galapagos. So, we've been looking at these vessels, and most of them we find are legal, but we're continuing to work on this. And I believe, knowing Chinese vessels and the way they operate, there is definitely going to be some illegalities going on. One thing is, when I did my sweep, which took about 3 days to catalog every single vessel that was there with the AIS, as I said, we had 213. Every time I log on, I get new vessels popping up out of nowhere. I'm now at 270 that we've cataloged and databased. These vessels weren't there a couple of days ago, but they are now.
Dropped from the sky,
So we are seeing a lot of anomalies with the AIS. I mean, there was the one that came out in the newspaper where they were saying there was a couple of boats that said they were fishing in New Zealand when they were actually off Galapagos. That we do see anomalies with AIS, because it's based on what you actually input into the machine on the boat. But I work, very closely with marine traffic. We met with them in Singapore, and we have a very close relationship. And when I find stuff, anomalies, I then call them, ask them to have a look at it, get their professional opinion. They also then run other models with the data they have, which isn't public domain. And so yesterday we had a long chat. I found vessels that were changing their name every 2 days. I found one vessel that left China, went to just off of Argentina directly. It was incredible. It must have been airlifted. It went across the Atlantic at 5.7 knots and then carried on across Africa and then across Southeast Asia. And then it transported from China to the Galapagos, where it was fishing for a little bit. And then in one day, it suddenly appeared back in China. So if the Chinese fleet has now developed warp drive, I think we're all in trouble. But yeah, this is where, obviously there are areas of doubt. I've been tracking reefers that these refrigerated cargo ships. So for those who don't realize, the way these massive fleets stay out at sea on the high seas is they meet up with these big refrigerated container or cargo ships. They meet up with them on the high sea. They transfer the catch to that ship. They also replenish the fishing boats with fuel, food, crew changes, allowing the boats to stay out at sea fishing 100% of the time. And that's where I feel the biggest threat to our oceans is with these reefers that allow these boats to do that. Because if the boats had to keep coming to shore, obviously they would be less effective.
Sure.
But we're actually trying to get in touch with the South Pacific RFMO to get a list of all of the reefers that are actually authorized to be working in the Galapagos, because a lot of the ones we've found, we believe aren't, and there could be an illegality there. So, but we're seeing reefers that have actually gone into the area, and on marine traffic, whenever you go alongside another vessel, you have what they call a proximity alert. And we've got reefers there that haven't had a single proximity alert in 3 months when they've been sailing around amongst the fleet. So there's lots of things that we're looking into. And, as soon as we get any solid evidence, then we'll go to China, who will, I believe, they will act immediately and come down with the full force of the law. Every time I've ever dealt with the Chinese government on fishery issues, they have been really supportive. They've basically, you give them the evidence and they just say, okay, we will open an investigation, thank you. And then a couple of months later, we actually got a reply back when I was with Sea Shepherd, and they said, yep, thank you for your evidence. We did this investigation. This is our foundings. These are our actions we've taken. And we had the 6 boats in the Indian Ocean, and the Steve Irwin followed them all the way back to the Chinese coast. And they took action. We gave them all the evidence, and, that's what happened. The same happened with Timor when I went to East Timor.
Right. I remember that campaign.
Yeah, so that was probably the highlight of my time with Sea Shepherd. Certainly a highlight of of my activism career. That all came from a tip-off from divers. So Divers for Sharks and divers around the world actually started that. I was at ADEX in Singapore, the dive show in Singapore. And I had a young lady who had a dive center in East Timor, and she came to me, and we just bumped into each other. She saw my shirt and said, I need to talk to you. I've got this footage, come and see it. And it was the Fuyanyu Leng 999, which was 100 meters offshore, and had all these Chinese boats just literally offloading sharks into the hold. She had already notified the authorities. The authorities had given them a $500 fine and told them you're not supposed to catch sharks. Now, these 15 boats were there. They were there legally. They had a fishing permit from the Fisheries Ministry to catch fish. But they were told don't catch sharks. And all they were doing was catching sharks. So after I saw that footage, we then followed using the tracking software. And we followed the Fuyanyu Leng, and it went back to Fuzhou, and then it went across towards Galapagos. And then I notified Ecuador and sort of said, this boat's in the neighborhood, it's not going to be up to much good. And then 3 days later, sure enough, they arrested it. It's been the biggest bust in Ecuador. But the question still remained, what about the 15 boats? So I went to Paul Watson and Alex Cornelison and said, look, I would really want to go and investigate and just do a reconnaissance mission. That was all it was supposed to be. The Ocean Warrior was currently sitting in Perth, and it had been sat there for about 5 months. So I said, look, can I just borrow it for 6 weeks? Just want to just go and have a look. And that was all it was. It was we kept, the joke of the whole campaign was, this is just a reconnaissance mission. So we went up there and we sailed around in the dark with our AIS switched off, trying to find these boats, and found them, documented them, hauling up shark after shark after shark. And then a big storm was coming and they went into a bay in Timor. And I had a contact with the Australian Federal Police who was in Timor training the local police. I sent the images to him and he said, could you come and show them to the commandant of the Police Nationale Timor-Leste? So I went ashore, showed him in a little bar in Timor, showed him the video. And he said, well, we just want to arrest these guys, but we don't have a boat. And I turned around and I said, well, hey, I have one. So we boarded on some PNTL officers, and a load went overland overnight, and we conducted a raid at 6 a.m. And they said, if you find one shark on board, we will arrest them. Well, we boarded, we opened up the freezers, and it was just full, chock-a-block with sharks. We estimated they were killing about 80,000 sharks between the 15 boats every month. So when you start saying 100 million sharks, which we all know is absolutely bogus, it's probably 250 million a year. But when people say 100 million, oh, that's impossible, that's exaggeration. Well, that one fleet of 15 boats was doing well over 1 million. That's just 15 boats. China has 3,500 deep water boats. Japan, Korea, they all have 4,000 boats each. So 250 million is dead easy to catch. But yeah, so that was Timor, and they ended up arresting those boats and they kept them detained for 9 months. And then as the fishery minister was about to be kicked out of office, he managed to persuade the judge that there was no evidence to hold these boats, even though they had pictures of the police holding up hammerhead sharks, and they let them go. So they went back to China. I flew to China, documented them as they came in, and then we sent a report to China. And China took action. That fleet was called Honglong. They also owned the Fuyanyu Leng 999, so they were the second biggest fishing fleet in China. They're now defunct. But it was interesting because the wife owned Honglong. The husband owned another company called Pingtan Marine Enterprises, which is listed on the NASDAQ. And so he was getting all the funding by saying, we own the biggest fleet in China, we own this, we own this many boats. But what was actually happening, the reality was they had all these rusting relics when the fishery minister in Indonesia, Susi, locked down about all the illegal boats, about the overseas boats that were in there. And they locked about 120 of their boats in harbor. These were rusting relics. And what the guy was doing was his wife was selling them to Pingtan, and he was making a big announcement. We've just acquired another 5 big international, ocean-going fishing boats. Yeah. And he was getting all the funding. So, I mean, that's the level we're looking at when we're talking about international fishing. These vessels, and this is one thing that I've always dealt with when I deal with China, is you have to drive what I call the wedge between the country and these private fishing companies that are acting illegally. Now, there is obviously some facilitation going on where China is giving fuel subsidies, boat subsidies, and I think the modus operandi is go out and get whatever you can, but if you get caught, you're on your own. And that's what we're trying to do, is catch them, because as soon as we do and we give the evidence to China, they say, absolutely, we'll throw the book at them, and they do. But it is, we have to keep looking at these are private companies. Yeah, these are private companies listed sometimes in the Cayman Islands, and they're using the Chinese flag because they know that China's big and you know, they're a powerful nation. And they're going in and doing these things in the name of China, making China look bad. That's the angle I always use with China, and it seems to work because nobody wants to look bad. China knows it has a bad image that it needs to clean up. So as soon as you can report these things, China will take action, and they've been very, very key so far.
That's really important, and that's probably one more reason why people should support Oceans Asia, because they're doing crucial work which not that many activist NGOs are doing, and that's probably one of the things that is really important to concentrate on. One is to help separate the criminals from the legal fishing as far as China is concerned, and that is something that you're helping to do, and it's really, really important. And the other is to figure out ways in which these loopholes that allow for overfishing in the high seas, especially in highly sensitive areas, are closed somehow. In the Galapagos region, there is this big fight because not only of the Chinese fleets, but also especially Central American and Western South American fleets, domestic ones, that get into protected areas like Malpelo or in Colombia or Cocos. And all this corridor, Malpelo, Galapagos, and Cocos, are extremely important for sharks and for other marine life. And they have these big gaps between them because it's high seas. So somehow, perhaps we should try work with the Biodiversity Beyond National Jurisdiction process at the UN to figure out ways of filling those gaps where high seas intersect with this highly important marine biodiversity gaps between national jurisdictions, like happens in the Malpelo, Cocos, Galapagos zone. And
well, especially with the you know, the gap between Ecuador and Galapagos, there's that slither, and we saw the Chinese fleet sitting right there. I mean, that would be not that difficult to literally just extend that out. Okay, I know EEZs are 200 nautical miles, and that's where there's the boundary. But in certain cases, I do feel that is where we need to be able to go beyond the boundaries and actually just join those two, because, like you say, it is a corridor. You know, and one thing to note, you know, I mean, yes, all the attention is drawn to these 300 boats that are fishing for squid, but at the same time, you've got over 300 smaller, mid-size Ecuadorian boats that are going out there taking all the sharks. They're landing them in Manta and along the coast there. Nobody's actually looking at them because, one, they're not Chinese, even though they are shipping to Hong Kong. Yeah, we had the big bust earlier this year. We had 26 tons from Ecuador, you know, of shark fin. 26 tons. I mean, that's, when you think about how many sharks that is. And those came from the mid-sized vessels that are Ecuadorian flagged, operating without AIS in that same area. So I'm not saying it's not Chinese vessels, but it's also, we have to look at everybody. We have to look at everybody.
Absolutely.
It's not only one bad guy.
Well, I've always said it's a global shark crisis. It's not just the Chinese that are killing all these sharks. Everybody's killing the sharks. They sell the fins to China. They sell the meat to, like, Brazil, Italy, Australia. I mean, when you tell an Australian if they're having fish and chips, it's probably flake, which is shark, they just go, really? And they don't even know because it's been named something else. Yeah, the squalene and the cartilage pills are all going to Japan and to the US, you know? So it's a global shark crisis, and we all need to be doing our bit.
Absolutely.
For sure. That's it. Gary, tell me something. Is there, on your website, do you have a place where we can buy some T-shirts or flags or caps from the Ocean Asia?
There is a small shop on there, but it's something that I really do need to expand. It's just we've been so busy, as I said. I don't really have that much time to do all the fundraising part because I'm just spending all the time actually getting out there and doing, you know, stuff on the front lines. But we will be expanding our merchandise section. Those were the quick shirts that we made, like the one I'm wearing here.
Right.
But yeah, we will be focusing on that. It's
So
all
you
about
should,
it's all a matter of cash flow, you know,
it definitely
and
needs to, because
minimum orders.
I
my
know
Sea
that
Shepherd
very
Hong
well.
Kong T-shirt is in tatters.
Yeah, I say that because in our international pages now that we have, before Divers for Sharks page was only in Portuguese, due to lack of time to translate. But now that it is in English and Spanish, and we have some good work with producing on demand uh, goodies, and so we
Yeah,
have now six, no, I mean 5 international stores that can sell and distribute our products by the United States, United Kingdom, Spain, Canada, and Australia. So it helps very much our job because we don't have to produce the t-shirts, the mugs, the caps. They produce and they support our work with part of the funds. So that's
yeah,
really
yeah.
good. And guys, if you are uh, listening to this and watching this live, if you are from United States, United Kingdom, Spain, Canada, or Australia, please visit our international stores. That will help us really, really, really a lot. And do please visit the Ocean Asia store also. I'll be really glad if tomorrow or in a week or so I see some one of you, our followers, wearing the Ocean Asia T-shirts and wearing the Divers for Sharks
Yep.
T-shirts. That's the way you can support in really strong way.
I was actually going to be wearing my Divers for Sharks, but I couldn't find it. I couldn't find it in
No,
the
no,
dark
no.
in the drawer this morning.
Right now you are Ocean Asia.
We need to send you a new one.
Yeah, we'll do it. Unfortunately, the post office in Brazil are now on strike,
Oh
so
yeah.
I won't be able to send it. I don't know from
Well, that's the
that
thing.
time, but
I've had orders for our shirts, and we can't actually send them at the moment, which is the biggest problem.
yeah,
You know, but yeah, I mean, with Sea Shepherd, 50% of our revenue was pretty much coming in from merchandise,
Mhm.
and obviously, merchandise is a very key way of getting support. You know, people like to donate their
You
money,
get the
but they
word
also
out
would
too,
they'd like to get something for it. You know,
yeah.
so
And
you know.
talk about it with other people too.
Yeah, well, they are conversation starters, especially. I mean, the Sea Shepherd iconic Jolly Roger. I mean, the amount of times I was stopped in the street and asked about it, and you know, you get to just have the conversation starter, really. So,
yep.
yes, we will be focusing on that. And there's also Penguin, a very good website that I used, where I paid a subscription and it automatically translates all of your websites for you.
Good.
Oh,
It's on. I just did that just the other day on our Oceans Asia site. At the moment, it's only in 3 languages. It's Chinese, French, and Spanish. I will be adding other languages on there, but it just automatically translates your website for you, and it's a very good translation
Yeah, please
apparently.
let me know about it.
Yes, I'll send you a
Gary,
message.
you got on screen Paula Viana, one of our followers. I guess she said you have a good accent.
Well, I'm not
And
Aussie
also the
actually.
accent.
I'm actually English. So yeah, I have been hanging around a lot of Australians. So a lot of people do think I'm an Aussie, but no, I'm British. I've just been out of Britain for most of my life. So yeah, and hanging out with a lot of Aussies.
Yeah, that
Fantastic.
also might be the mix with the Hong Kong speaking.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay, folks. So as we are about 58 minutes live, I'm going to ask you, José Truda, to please, for a few minutes, just a few minutes, talk about what you think about this live. The idea of this one with you, Gary, was his, Truda. So, Mr. Truda, what about all we're talking about? So what about the good side, the dark side? Not the dark side of the moon, that's actually a good side. What about the dark side of fishing? Let's say that.
Well, I guess that the important part of bringing out people like Gary who do environmental activism on the ground, and who also has been to these international treaties and looking at the way it works, is that those ordinary people like me willing to make a difference for conservation can choose who to support. The work that Gary does with Oceans Asia is absolutely amazing, uh, totally worthy of support in any way you can. If you can donate, donate. If you can donate, keep an eye on their social media, support their campaigns, talk to other people about it. That's what we need here in Divers for Sharks. I'm sure that's also what can help Oceans Asia to prosper. And we need these small teams of dedicated people to prosper for the oceans, much more than many of the big international NGOs out there. I am a big fan of Sea Shepherd because they're out there on the ground doing stuff. And after 42 years of doing environmental activism, I didn't have much patience for other big international NGOs that do a lot of talk but do not walk the walk, as some of these people like Gary do. It is also important to listen to voices coming from countries like Hong Kong and China because they can give us a different perspective away from all the hype that we hear about this thing. Gary was talking about this. I'm sure that this will be recorded and we'll put it up in our YouTube and our Facebook page. I'll make sure that it gets to other outlets too, because it's important to understand what can be done to change the dire situation we are in. With China, it is important that we keep pushing their government to understand that overfishing and IUU, illegal, unregulated, and unreported fishing, is really bad for business. I think that they get it, and as Gary said, once we are able to report illegal activities, they're keen on working on that. So we need to differentiate the illegal activities from the actual Chinese people and Chinese government. And the other is figuring out where we can influence these international treaties and making a difference. Right now, it is really important that we concentrate on figuring out what's going on with these negotiations on biodiversity beyond national jurisdiction. As Gary said, while we're looking at China, there's all sorts of national fishing fleets doing a lot of damage in our oceans. And there has to be better frameworks to deal with that. So let's make sure that we also look into our own countries and that we figure out what our countries are doing in terms of improving the international framework for ocean conservation. These are the things that I would probably remember saying after all these days spent in the ocean with humpback whales around here. Beyond the virus crisis, which will end at some point, we have to make sure that we continue to mobilize, that we continue to work together for our shared oceans. And to us, it has been a great, great pleasure to host Gary tonight in Brazil, this morning in Hong Kong. And I hope we'll have other opportunities to share our work and share our ideas and perspectives and these things. Gary, muito obrigado. Thank you so much for being with us, not only today, but throughout our friendship and our trajectory together for the oceans.
Yeah,
That's
no,
it, my
thank you.
friend. Thank you very much. And people, please sorry once again for the most beautiful part of Diver for Sharks, Sandrina, being offline. Next time she'll be here for sure. Gary, bye, my friend.
Yeah, take care.
In about 2 weeks, we will be here back again live. This time probably on Spanish with Rondal Arauz to talk about sharks and Costa Rica. Okay. Thank you very
Awesome.
much.
Take
Bye,
care.
folks.
Thank you. Thank you,
Bye.
guys. Have a good day there, Gary.
Yeah, we'll do.